When I think back to my childhood, it's impossible not to smile at the sheer chaos and wonder that was Times Square in the 1970s. As a 10-year-old navigating the bustling heart of New York City, my playground was unlike any other. The neon lights flickered day and night, painting the streets with a kaleidoscope of colors that danced off the rain-slick pavement. The cacophony of honking taxis, street musicians, and chattering crowds served as the soundtrack to my formative years. Our apartment was a modest two-bedroom walk-up perched above a deli that always smelled of pastrami and rye. My parents, both hard-working and eternally optimistic, had moved to the city with dreams as big as the skyscrapers. Dad worked as a stagehand in one of the old theaters, while Mom stitched costumes for off-Broadway shows. Their love story was as vibrant as the city itself, a tale I'd often beg them to recount during dinner. Every morning, I'd step out into a world teeming with life. The air was thick with the aroma of roasted chestnuts from street carts, mingling with less pleasant odors that were just as much a part of the city's character. Vendors shouted out their daily specials, and performers practiced their acts on street corners, hoping to make it big one day. The sidewalks were a river of people, businessmen in suits, artists with paint-splattered clothes, tourists looking upward in awe, and kids like me weaving through the crowd like fish in a stream. One of my favorite spots was Uncle Morty's record store nestled between a comic book shop and a bakery. Uncle Morty wasn't my real uncle, but he might as well have been family. His shop was a sanctuary of sound, a place where I first discovered the magic of music. Vinyl records lined the walls from floor to ceiling, and the gentle crackle of a needle hitting the groove became a comforting constant. He'd let me sift through the new arrivals, and sometimes, if the shop was quiet, he'd play a record just for me. That's how I fell in love with the soulful melodies of Marvin Gaye and the infectious rhythms of the Bee Gees. Life in Times Square was anything but dull. There was Benny the hot dog vendor, who claimed his secret ingredient was a pinch of love, though I suspected it was just extra mustard. He'd slip me an extra dog now and then with a wink. Miss Eleanor, the elderly lady who fed the pigeons every afternoon, told stories of the city from decades past. She had a soft spot for kids and always had a peppermint candy tucked away for me. Then there was the ever-present hustle of street performers. One day, I stumbled upon a group of breakdancers who spun on their heads and moved in ways that defied logic. Mesmerized, I watched until dusk, trying to mimic their moves later in the privacy of my room, much to the downstairs neighbor's chagrin. Amidst the spectacle, there were also the shadows, the peep shows with flashing signs I'd been told to ignore, the panhandlers who lingered in alleyways, and the occasional scuffle that would break out over who knows what. But even these elements were threads in the rich tapestry of my city life. My parents taught me to be cautious but also compassionate. Everyone has a story, Mom would say. It's up to you whether you choose to listen. The 1970s were a time of significant change, and the city felt it deeply. The energy crisis led to dimmed lights and conservation efforts that seemed almost ironic in a place known for its perpetual glow. The end of the Vietnam War brought soldiers back home, some of whom wandered Times Square with haunted eyes. I remember one veteran named Jack who sat outside the theater where Dad worked. Over time, Dad struck up conversations with him, sometimes bringing him a sandwich or a cup of coffee. Their exchanges taught me about the cost of war and the importance of kindness. One historic event that left a mark on me was the Bicentennial celebration in 1976. The entire city seemed to be wrapped in red, white, and blue. Parades filled the streets, and fireworks painted the night sky with bursts of color that rivaled the neon signs below. I felt an overwhelming sense of pride and unity, even if I didn't fully grasp the weight of the occasion at the time. School was a melting pot of cultures and backgrounds. My best friend, Maria, was the daughter of Cuban immigrants. Her mother made the best empanadas, and their home was always filled with laughter and music. Maria and I would spend hours exploring the city, our imaginations turning mundane corners into enchanted kingdoms. We'd pretend the steam rising from subway grates was the breath of dragons, or that the towering billboards were messages from giants. One winter day, a heavy snowfall transformed Times Square into a wonderland. The usual hustle slowed as the city was blanketed in white. Maria and I built a lopsided snowman right in front of the Coca-Cola sign, using bottle caps for eyes and a discarded scarf we found as a finishing touch. For a moment, the city felt quiet, almost peaceful, a rarity that made it all the more magical. Food was another adventure altogether. Street vendors offered a smorgasbord of flavors from around the world. The spicy aroma of kebabs, the sweet scent of candied nuts, and the savory smell of pizza by the slice were irresistible. One of my most vivid memories is tasting my first falafel from a vendor named Ahmed. The explosion of flavors, crisp outside, tender inside, with tangy sauces, was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It opened my eyes and taste buds to the culinary diversity that the city embraced. Music was the heartbeat of Times Square. The rise of disco permeated every corner. Even at 10, I couldn't help but move to the beats that poured out of clubs and car radios. My older cousin, Lisa, snuck me into a daytime soundcheck at a club once. The swirling lights and mirrored balls made it feel like stepping into another dimension. Although I was too young to fully participate in the nightlife, the music became a soundtrack to my days, energizing the city even more. Despite the city's fast pace, there were moments of simplicity and reflection. Sundays were reserved for family. We'd picnic in Central Park, feeding ducks and watching street performers. Dad would fly a kite with me, its tail fluttering against the backdrop of skyscrapers. Those moments taught me that even in a big city, you could find pockets of tranquility. Community was the glue that held us together. When a fire broke out in a neighboring building, everyone rallied to help. Clothes, food, and shelter were offered without hesitation. It didn't matter where you came from or what you did, when someone was in need, the community became a family. That sense of unity left a lasting impression on me about the importance of looking out for one another. As I grew older, I began to understand the complexities of the world around me. The newsstand where I'd buy comic books closed down, replaced by a chain store. Familiar faces moved away as rent prices soared. The gritty charm of Times Square started to give way to a more polished, commercialized version. While progress brought improvements, it also felt like losing a piece of what made the city uniquely ours. Yet, through all the changes, the core values I learned remained steadfast. I discovered the beauty in diversity, the strength found in community, and the resilience needed to navigate life's unpredictability. The city's relentless energy taught me to embrace challenges with enthusiasm and to find joy in the simplest of things, a lesson I've carried with me ever since. Growing up in Times Square during the 1970s was an experience like no other, a whirlwind of sights, sounds, and sensations that shaped me into the person I am today. Amid the flashing lights and constant motion, I found a deep appreciation for the vibrant tapestry of humanity that surrounded me. The era's simplicity wasn't in its quietude but in its authenticity, the raw, unfiltered experiences that taught me about love, compassion, and the beauty of everyday moments. I learned that life's richness comes not from the grandeur of our surroundings but from the connections we forge and the stories we share. Whether it was dancing to disco beats on the sidewalk, sharing a meal with friends from different cultures, or simply watching the city breathe from my fire escape, these memories are treasures that time cannot fade. Times Square may have transformed over the years, but the lessons and values from my childhood remain timeless. They remind me to find wonder in the world, to embrace change with an open heart, and to always look for the light amidst the shadows.